Lesson 2.2, Task 2. Solve equations using the distributive property. Previously, you solved one-step and two-step equations. Now you will solve multi-step equations. Such equations may contain grouping symbols. In order to free the terms in the equation that contain grouping symbols, you can use the distributive property. All right, the steps for solving the equation and checking the solution are shown, but the steps have been scrambled. All right, so the first thing we need to do is distribute the 5 inside of the parentheses. So they've got the equation here. Step 1, they wrote the equation down. And step 2, you're going to distribute. So you're going to have 5 times 2x and 5 times negative 3. Distributive property says you multiply the 5 by everything inside of the parentheses. So we're going to have 10x minus 15 plus 4 equals negative 6. So this would be step 2, getting rid of the parentheses. All right, the next step, you would want to combine like terms. On the left, there's a negative 15 and a plus 4 that can be combined. And if you add those two together on the same side, you get negative 11. Now you're solving for x, so we want to get rid of the negative 11 by adding 11 to both sides of the equation. So I'm going to have 10x, and then if I add 11 to both sides, I have 10x equals 5. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 10. I'm dividing by 10 because I'm solving for x. 5 divided by 10 is 1/2. 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So what that does is put your steps in order and shows you how to solve that equation using distributive property. All right, now it says place the check steps in the correct order. Step 1 is already placed. All right, so they took the 0.5 and they substituted it in for x, and now we have to check it. This time we have two grouping symbols. The 0.5 is in parentheses, and the 2 and the negative 3 are in another parentheses. So this is multiplication. So we have to multiply before we subtract. Again, we work inside parentheses first. Order of operations is what we're doing. So 2 times 1/2 is 1. So if we look down through here, what they did was replace this with 1 minus 3. Since 2 times 1/2 is 1, that's where the 1 minus 3 comes in. Then you're still working inside the parentheses, so 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Everything else stays the same, but we do inside the parentheses first. Then we multiply. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. And you notice there's the question mark here because we're checking this. So we don't know that these are equal yet. If 0.5 is the correct solution, when we get to the last step, they will be equal. The left side will be equal to the right side. Negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6. Negative 6 equals negative 6. So it did check, and that means 0.5 is the solution to that equation. All right, that's all for task 2. If you have any questions, let me know. Lesson 2.2, task 3. Solve equations using the distributive property. Recall that the distributive property also allows you to combine like terms. The steps for following the equation, negative 2x plus 1/2 times 6x minus 5 equals 3/2 are shown, but some justifications are missing. All right, so you can see here, this is the given equation, and you can see the next step, they use distributive property. 1/2 of 6 is 3. 1/2 of negative 5 is negative 5/2. So here they use the distributive property to get rid of the parentheses. Once they do that, then they use the distributive property again to factor out this x. So negative 2x plus 3x. So they're combining like terms. So for this property here, all they did was factor out the x. All right, so it says which property justifies rewriting 1/2 times 6x minus 5 as 3x minus 5/2. Again, half of 6x is 3x, and half of negative 5 is negative 5 halves. So that was distributive property in order to get rid of the parentheses. All right, so it says which property justifies rewriting negative 2x plus 3x as negative 2 plus 3 times x. So they pulled the x out, but if I took x and multiplied it by negative 2, I'd get negative 2x. And if I took x times 3, I would get 3x. So this is just distributive property written in reverse. So that is still using the distributive property. All right, so it shows your steps down through here. It shows the 1/2 times 6x as 3x, and 1/2 times negative 5 is negative 5 halves. Then it shows using the distributive property again to combine like terms here. So that would be x, because negative 2 plus 3 is positive 1, and you still have your variable there. So 1x minus 5 halves equals 3 halves. From there, you have to add 5 halves to both sides to get your final answer. It says which property justifies adding 5 halves to each side of the equation to get x equals 4. That would be your addition property of equality. Addition property of equality says if you add the same thing to both sides of the equation, you still have an equal sign. You still have an equation. So that is the addition property. That's all for task 3. If you have any questions, let me know. Lesson 2.2, task 4. Solve equations with variables on both sides. When a variable appears on both sides of an equation, you can use the addition property of equality or the subtraction property of equality to move the variable from one side to the other. Doing so allows you to isolate the variable on one side. The steps for solving the equation 4 times x plus 1 equals negative 3 times x plus 3 are shown, but some of the justifications are missing. All right, so again, we're going to have to start by multiplying the 4 by the x and the 1. So distributive property says you multiply the 4 by both things inside the parentheses. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 1 is 4. Bring down the plus 1 and then do the same thing on the other side. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. So we use distributive property twice right there. So it says complete the statement that describes the justification for the second step. So that is distributive property. It allows you to rewrite each side without grouping symbols. All right, so here again, that goes from this is what we looked at above. This is the second step using distributive property. Then they combine like terms. 4 plus 1 is 5, so they simply combine like terms there. And then we need to see what we can do to get the variable on one side. So it looks like they are adding 3x to both sides. So that gets rid of the variable on the right. Negative 3x plus 3x will cancel and leave just negative 9. But then we have to add 3x to keep this equation equal. So addition property shows that you add the same thing to both sides of the equation. That's addition property of equality. So it says complete the statement that describes the justification for the fourth step. The justification for the fourth step is the addition property of equality. It allows you to add 3x to both sides of the equation. All right, once you do that, now you can combine like terms. 4x plus 3x is 7x. Bring down my 5. The negative 3x and the 3x cancel, like I said before, and bring down the negative 9. The only thing left to do is subtract 5 from both sides. That would be subtraction property of equality. And then divide both sides by 7 to get negative 2. So it says complete the statement that describes the justification for the sixth step. So let's see. One, two, three, four, 5, 6. All right, so 7x equals negative 14. So we're going to divide. So that would be, wait a minute, it says allows you to subtract 5 from each side. So they're looking at the step above it. So when you subtract 5 from each side, they're actually looking from the 5th to the 6th step. So that one would be subtraction property of equality. All right, so when you subtract 5 from both sides, that gives you subtraction property. The next step would be divide by 7. That would be division property of equality, which they state right here. And then this is your final answer. All right, that is all for task 4. If you have any questions, let me know.